Welcome to this explainer. Okay, imagine for a second that you're trying to stop a massive leak after your ship is already completely underwater. It sounds exhausting, ridiculously expensive, and honestly, highly ineffective, right? Well, unfortunately, that is exactly the reality of reactive oversight in a lot of massive organizations. For decades, the standard operating procedure has basically been to wait for something to break, investigate the wreckage, and then try to assign blame. But the world is moving fast, and that old logic, it just isn't cutting it anymore. So let's dive right into this incredible 50-point strategic guide from the UN Office of Internal Oversight Services, or OIOS. This document aims to answer one seriously powerful, transformative question. What if we just stopped fraud, misconduct, and waste before it ever even started? I mean, we're talking about an enterprise operating in dozens of high-risk environments, frequently in the middle of armed conflicts or massive humanitarian emergencies. In those conditions, waiting for a failure to happen basically means you've already lost. Here is what we're going to unpack today. First, the limits of reactive oversight. Second, the shift to preventive oversight. Third, data and early warnings. Fourth, culture and integrity. And finally, how to build a continuous learning organization. Let's get into it. All right, part one, the limits of reactive oversight and the sheer danger of arriving too late. Think about it. For over 3 decades, standard oversight was essentially an after-the-fact autopsy. Examining what went wrong and trying to scrape back funds way after the damage was done. But treating the disease is very different from just preventing the infection in the first place. While rigorous, those reactive autopsies historically only recover a tiny fraction of what's actually lost. A preventive system asks a totally different question. Instead of asking if controls worked effectively last year, it asks, hey, which of our controls are most likely to fail next week? Hardening a control today is an investment with absolutely massive returns because it averts an endless cycle of future failures. And we really have to remember why this matters so deeply. As the source material explicitly points out, every single dollar diverted in complex field environments represents not just a financial loss, but a devastating erosion of moral authority. You literally can't just audit a community's lost trust and expect it to magically bounce back. Reactive investigations just arrive too late, and they leave the picture incomplete. Moving to part two, shifting to preventive oversight and actively anticipating those vulnerabilities. The crucial takeaway here is that the center of gravity absolutely must move upstream. We're talking early warning systems and deliberately designing resilient processes. A preventive system is an anticipatory discipline. It's about spotting the crack in the foundation before the house falls down, catching vulnerabilities before they crystallize into tangible loss or reputational disaster. It completely reframes oversight from being a backward-looking inspector into a forward-looking sensor that keeps the entire organizational system honest. Now, to actually operationalize this massive paradigm shift, the strategic guide doesn't just offer some vague philosophy. It outlines exactly 50 discrete, highly actionable points. These cover everything from risk identification and analytics all the way to culture and capacity building. It is essentially a multi-year roadmap designed to transform how an enterprise protects itself, turning it from a reactive obligation into a major forward-looking strength. But to pull this off, the different oversight disciplines have got to work together seamlessly. You have audit, investigation, and inspection and evaluation. Historically, sure, these might have operated in their own little silos, but in a preventive system, no way. They have to share intelligence. Audit understands exactly how controls fail. Investigation knows exactly how individuals exploit those weaknesses. And evaluation sees how the policies themselves go wrong. When you combine them, you create an enterprise-wide preventative risk register that is incredibly powerful. Which brings us to part 3, data and early warnings. These are the hard skills of prevention. Look, you simply cannot anticipate risk manually at a global scale anymore. You need heavy-hitting technological, data-driven tools. You need predictive early warning signals that move before the harm does. Say the risk is procurement fraud. Well, the early indicator might be a sudden, weird spike in emergency sole source contracts, where the normal competitive bidding process is just completely bypassed. Or if the risk is payment fraud, maybe it's a sneaky pattern of recurring payments falling just $1 below the threshold that triggers senior approval. By catching these exact patterns in the data, the organization gets alerted long before conventional audit would ever notice them. To catch those indicators, you need continuous monitoring. By deploying data analytics at scale, systems can monitor core financial processes in near real time. We're talking automated rule testing, anomaly detection to flag patterns no human eye could ever spot, and real-time risk dashboards that route warnings instantly to the people who can actually intervene.
And it also involves horizon scanning, basically looking beyond current trends to spot emerging threats before they fully materialize. But hey, a robust fraud risk program doesn't just rely on one shiny tool. It balances three distinct layers: visible deterrence, which raises the perceived cost of getting caught; strict control prevention, which shuts the door on the opportunity entirely; and analytical detection, which catches the clever schemes that inevitably adapt. You absolutely need all three, because adversaries are smart. No single layer is going to be entirely foolproof. All right, part 4, culture, people, and integrity. The soft skills of prevention. Honestly, these soft skills are arguably the most important piece of the puzzle, because the most sophisticated algorithms in the world will absolutely fail if the human element is ignored. Controls govern behavior at the margins, culture governs it at the core, and it all starts with the tone at the top. The strategy emphasizes that leadership behavior is the ultimate control mechanism. When senior managers visibly uphold integrity, especially when it's costly or inconvenient, and actually face real accountability for their own lapses, it establishes a culture that permeates everywhere. But if leadership tolerates shortcuts by the well-connected, you can forget it. No code of conduct will persuade staff that integrity actually matters. And that tone from leadership directly fuels this next crucial point: fostering psychological safety. Empowering whistleblowers is treated as a core preventive asset here. Why? Because everyday people, staff on the ground, partners, beneficiaries, are literally the best early warning sensors an organization possesses. But they're only going to speak up if they're fiercely protected from retaliation, have highly accessible reporting channels, and, most importantly, actually see their concerns acted upon promptly. You also have to bake this culture of prevention into the very design of your operations. The absolute best time to address risk isn't after a program launches, it's before it even begins. By doing pre-implementation control reviews, oversight ensures that integrity is engineered into procurement, supply chains, and human resources from day one. I mean, catching a design flaw before a multi-million-dollar program goes live is incomparably cheaper than trying to clean up the mess later. Finally, part 5. Building a continuous learning organization that evolves faster than the threats it faces. Because bad actors adapt, technologies advance, and environments constantly shift, yesterday's controls easily become tomorrow's vulnerabilities. Prevention is never truly finished. To keep up, you've got to build a continuous feedback loop. When an investigation uncovers a new fraud scheme, you don't just punish the offender and call it a day. You extract the exact control weakness they exploited, instantly harden global controls across the entire enterprise to stop it from happening again, and then independently verify that the new safeguard actually works. It completely transforms an isolated failure into enterprise-wide knowledge. You also have to look forward through scenario planning and stress testing. By institutionalizing lessons learned, scanning the horizon for new threats, and stress testing your current processes against absolute worst-case scenarios, the organization rehearses failure in its imagination, so it doesn't have to experience it in reality. You map out the single points of failure and you recalibrate your system long before the crisis ever hits. But how do you actually measure the success of all this? This is the paradox of prevention, right? Because you're trying to measure events that didn't happen. So success has to be tracked through leading indicators. You measure things like the health of your active controls, the speed at which oversight recommendations actually get implemented, the strength of your ethical climate through staff surveys, and how quickly management responds to early warnings. You aren't measuring the volume of failure anymore, you're measuring the strength of your defenses. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to take a second and consider your own environment. Whether you work in a massive global entity or just a small local business, ask yourself this provocative question. If your organization's controls were bypassed tomorrow, would you know before the damage was done? Are your systems built to merely react to failures, waiting for the ship to sink, or are you out there actively anticipating and preventing the leak? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating paradigm shift with me, and I really hope it changes the way you think about risk and oversight.